Hi, welcome to Come Study with me, Elder Brock. Today, we will be looking at 1 Samuel 26 through 28. Chapter 26. Night has fallen over the wilderness again. Saul is still hunting David. 3,000 chosen men are with him. The king is sleeping in the middle of the camp, his spear stuck in the ground beside him, the sign of his authority resting next to a man who has already rejected the word of the Lord. David sees where Saul is lying. Then, under cover of darkness, he and Abishai go down into the camp. It is a breathtaking moment. Every soldier is asleep. The king is exposed. The spear is within reach. Abishai whispers that this is the hour. One thrust, and the long chase is over. But David will not take the throne with blood on his hands. He restrains the hand of the man beside him and says that he will not stretch forth his hand against the Lord's anointed. David is not calling Saul righteous. He is not pretending Saul has done no evil. He is saying that vengeance does not belong to him. The Lord can smite Saul. Saul can die in battle. His day can come in the Lord's way. But David will not force open a door God has not opened. So David takes only the spear and the cruse of water. Then he climbs to a distant hill and cries out across the darkness. The camp wakes in shame. Abner is rebuked for failing to guard the king. Saul hears David's voice and must face the truth again. David had every opportunity to kill him and did not do it. That is the power of integrity. It can stand in the presence of slander, threat, and injustice, and still refuse to become evil in return. Saul blesses David with his lips. He admits that David has done well. But the chapter leaves us with a painful reality. A man can speak a soft word for a moment and still remain unchanged in heart. Chapter 26 teaches us that righteousness is proven most clearly when power is in our hand and we refuse to abuse it. Jesus Christ is the perfect King who had all power and yet used it in holiness, mercy, and obedience to the Father. When the world teaches us to seize, strike, and secure ourselves at any cost, the Lord teaches us to trust Him enough to stay clean. Chapter 27. After this, David says in his heart that one day Saul will finally destroy him. That sentence is important. The danger around David is real. But now fear begins to speak inside David himself. He crosses into Philistine territory and places himself under Achish, king of Gath. David is still alive, still moving, still surviving. But this chapter is not a chapter of rest. It is a chapter of pressure. The man who would not kill Saul now lives among the enemies of Israel. He is given Ziklag, and from there he makes raids, striking other peoples while reporting to Achish in a way that makes the Philistine king think David has turned permanently against Israel. The tension in this chapter is heavy because nothing feels stable. David is preserved, yet the ground beneath him is dangerous. Fear has pushed him into a place of compromise, secrecy, and complexity. There are moments in discipleship like this when exhaustion does not drive us into open rebellion, but into tangled survival choices that cloud the soul. And yet the Lord does not abandon David. That matters. Scripture does not hide the weakness of the Lord's servants. It shows us that even faithful people can make frightened decisions. But it also shows us that God continues to work, even in unstable places, and does not let His covenant purposes collapse because one of His servants is under strain. Chapter 27 warns us about making long decisions from short fear. When panic leads, compromise grows. But Jesus Christ remains steady when we are not. He is not double-minded. He is not driven by fear. He is the true refuge David was still learning to trust. When our hearts begin to say, "I shall perish one day," the better answer is not a Philistine shelter. The better answer is to return again to the Lord. Chapter 28. Now the shadows deepen. The Philistines gather again for war. Samuel is dead. The prophet's voice is gone from the land. Saul sees the host of the Philistines and is afraid, and his heart greatly trembles. He inquires of the Lord, but the Lord answers him not, neither by dreams, nor by Urim, nor by prophets. That silence is not random. It is the harvest of long rebellion. Saul had been warned. Saul had been corrected. Saul had heard the word of the Lord and resisted it. Now, when he desperately wants heaven to speak, heaven is silent. So he turns where he once should never have turned. He seeks out a woman with a familiar spirit at Endor. The king who once drove such things out of the land now disguises himself and goes by night to ask for forbidden help. That is what rebellion does when it ripens. It breaks the truth in public, then crawls back to darkness in private. The project study helps give an important caution here. A medium cannot, by her own power, bring up a prophet of God. If Samuel was present, it was not because of her power. Or another spirit may have impersonated him. In either case, this was not a godly method of revelation. Saul was not finding light. He was descending further into judgment. The message he receives is terrifying. The kingdom is taken from him. The Lord has departed from him. Israel will fall before the Philistines. Saul and his sons will die. When Saul hears it, he falls to the earth. The strong king who once stood tall above the people collapses in the dust, empty, terrified, and without strength. This is one of the darkest scenes in all the Old Testament. Not because God failed Saul, but because Saul kept rejecting God until darkness became the only place left for him to stand. And that is the warning of 1 Samuel 28. If men will not hear the word of the Lord in the day of mercy, they may one day beg for it in the day of judgment and find only silence. But the chapter also throws us toward Jesus, Christ by contrast. He is the true King who always hears the Father. He is the one in whom there is no rebellion, no disguise, no divided heart, and no dark seeking after forbidden voices. Saul moves deeper into death. Christ enters death and breaks it. Saul falls under judgment. Christ bears judgment and opens the way back to God. So these chapters leave us with two roads. One is David's road, imperfect yet restrained, learning to trust God rather than seize power. The other is Saul's road, proud, fearful, disobedient, and finally swallowed by darkness. The Lord still sets that choice before every soul. Trust Him, obey Him, wait for Him, and stay in the light.